Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to... Is this Q&A with the coach? No, it's not. This is me talking off the top of my head. Now, a bunch of you have asked me, what do I think about the Cobra Kai series? Ooh, I got the shirt and everything. And I've casually mentioned in some of the Q&As, I think it's a fun show. I enjoy it. I've watched it. It's fun to see these characters from The Karate Kid, which is a series I enjoyed as a young man, brought back to life in a TV show 30 years later. Pretty cool. That being said...
Spoilers. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
I saw season 3, and this is not going to be a spoiler review for season 3 per se.
Lies.
Although if I do throw spoilers out there, I will let you know in advance.
You've been warned.
But while watching this, I had this epiphany that the entire Cobra Kai series takes place in an alternate universe where UFC 1 never happened.
But what about this deleted scene with the BJJ black belts?
But wasn't there a deleted scene where Johnny Lawrence met some jiu-jitsu guys? Yeah, there was. Emphasis on deleted. Let's take a look at that scene really quick and then break it down. So Johnny's passing out some pamphlets for his karate school. Comes to presumably a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school. It says jiu-jitsu.
Hey guys, listen, you don't want to learn this Brazilian garbage, but you need some good old all-American, ass-kicking karate.
Isn't karate like from Asia?
Whatever, look, dude, all this new age crap like jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, they're all just cheap knockoffs of karate. What's going on out here? Trying to coach my students? Oh, I just figured instead of rolling around on the mat, hugging each other, maybe they'd like to learn a real martial art. Real martial art? Karate? Karate's a joke. It's for little kids. Basically a natty. Yeah? Well, Brazil sucks. Why should they don't talk to Master Todd that way. You know, in my dojo, I don't make the black guys call me master. Oh. Wanna take us to the mat? Right here on the pavement. Let's do it. You're lucky I'm on probation. Yeah, run away, loser. Karate's a thing of the past. BJJ's here to stay. Tell him, Master Todd. You know what, Todd? Just Todd's fine.
Okay, that is a great scene. It is deleted. I see two potential reasons why it was deleted, maybe, or three. One, maybe they didn't want to alienate potential viewers because a lot of people in the martial arts community, a lot of people who love the Karate Kid and love Cobra Kai also practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And if you poke fun at somebody's martial art, then yeah, they're much less likely to like you and enjoy your TV show. And also, you know, there is some racial humor there, and understandably, there may have been some questions about whether or not that was an appropriate joke. But then there's my third theory, which is that the Karate Kid, Cobra Kai, this whole franchise takes place in a universe where MMA isn't really a thing, where the UFC never happened. Now, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu did exist in the United States before the UFC. The Gracies did have a gym, and they were doing their Gracie challenges, and they were training in the United States before the UFC. But once again, the Karate Kid universe, the Cobra Kai universe, just works so much better if that never happened. Now, this scene brings up some really interesting questions, and before we get into those questions, the big punchline about, you know, black guys calling you master and whatnot. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, generally the instructor is referred to as professor or professor, which basically just means teacher in Portuguese. It's not unheard of for somebody to be referred to as master, but yeah, it's much more common to call them professor or professor. Again, just teacher. But then again, that's all master really means as far as the original context. If you're referring to a martial arts instructor as a martial arts master or a school teacher as a schoolmaster back in olden times. That's just a teacher. But yeah, so a little bit of a discrepancy with that joke. Maybe somebody brought that up and said, hey guys, you know, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they don't actually call their teachers master. And yeah, maybe that's why they deleted the scene, because without that, the joke doesn't really work.
You know what? Just Todd is fine.
It's a hilarious scene. I love it. I love the fact that it exists, but also the fact that it is deleted. Once again, concisive proof that Cobra Kai takes place in an alternate universe where the UFC never happened.
There's no tapping in karate.
Now, at first I thought, after watching season 1, that, you know, the Karate Kid universe takes place in a version of our own universe where the UFC did exist, because there was a scene where Johnny Lawrence is training his student Miguel, and he puts him in a rear naked choke, and Miguel taps out. And Johnny kind of laughs and says, there's no tapping out in karate. And tapping out didn't really become mainstream public information, if you will, until UFC became more popular. But at the same time, it wasn't completely unknown. Professional wrestling, which totally predates the Karate Kid, and presumably also exists in the Karate Kid universe, also features wrestlers tapping out to submissions. See, professional wrestling is based on old catch wrestling, which had essentially 2 ways to win. Win by pin or win by submission. But generally, back in the olden days, instead of tapping out, they would say uncle. But when you have a big spectacle, when it turns into sports entertainment, the crowd can't necessarily hear a wrestler say uncle, so he's got to give a visual sign that he submits, hence the tap out. So it's entirely possible that Miguel got this idea of tapping out from professional wrestling. I mean, he is a nerd after all. A nerd who gets bullied, and what do nerds who get bullied do? They look to strong athletic figures like wrestlers, for example, or in the modern day, in our world, UFC fighters, movie stars like Bruce Lee, martial arts action figures, bodybuilders, these hyper-masculine figures for strength and guidance, especially people in Miguel's situation growing up without a father figure in his home. And I can relate to that very strongly because I also grew up without a father figure in my home. And so there's a lot about this series that I wouldn't say speaks to me from that perspective, but I can relate to some of the characters in that way. Although it gets really annoying, the relationship between Johnny Lawrence and his son, what's his son's name? Anakin. Dang, I don't remember his son's name. I'm just going to call him Anakin Skywalker because that's basically who this character is. And Anakin goes over to the dark side and joins the evil Emperor Kreese at the end. Oh, sorry guys. I said I wouldn't give spoilers and I just gave a spoiler. Dang. Whoops. Maybe I'll give a spoiler in the editing via text or something. So, apparently this is now a spoiler review. So Anakin goes and he joins the dark side with evil Emperor Kreese at the end of season 3, and that's not necessarily the big cliffhanger. I liked the way they tied it up. Post-credits, if you will, where evil Sensei John Kreese gives a phone call to presumably his old buddy Terry Silver, perhaps the greatest movie villain of all time in one of the weirdest movies of all time. The Karate Kid 3 is not a great movie, but Terry Silver is a great villain. He's such a great character. I love that character so much that Terry Silver redeems everything else that sucks about the Karate Kid 3. The story is weird, the pacing is weird, the logic is weird, the fight choreography is often weird, but man, Terry Silver just saves it for me, and that is the one reason why I love that movie so much. world. Anyway, Terry Silver, loved that dude. So I was very stoked to learn that he's potentially coming back in the next season. So I was happy about that. But where was I? Yeah, 5 minutes ago, I said that Cobra Kai takes place in a universe without the UFC. And why do I say that? Now, in Southern California, where the story takes place, if you drive through that part of Southern California, you will see karate studio after karate studio. They're all over the place. It's like, as far as I know, it could be the karate capital of the world. Last time I was in Southern California, I was just driving around. It's where my wife is from. And I was just looking around, like, just saying out loud, there is an inordinate number of karate studios around here. Like, one within spitting distance of each other on every other block, it seemed. So it's not unreasonable to assume that, well, it probably is unreasonable to assume that you could have rival karate gangs in a high school and whatnot, but it's not unreasonable to assume that a significant number of high school students in the modern day would want to get involved in karate. But the way this plays out, the way Cobra Kai seasons 1, 2, and 3 play out, you would think that at some point in all of these brawls, somebody would get this bright idea, wait a minute. Jiu-jitsu exists, wrestling exists, grappling exists. There are a significant number of high school students who train in those things and excel in those things. There's some really awesome amateur fighters in high school, in Southern California, right now, in that part of the world, right now. And with all this karate gang commotion going on in these high schools, you would think someone, a representation of a more complete fighter, would step in and shut that down. Some of you might be confused about that, who don't actually know how to fight, who think that all fighting styles are the same in value in a fight. And it's just objectively not true. It's not. A fighter who is a complete fighter, who knows how to strike and grapple and clinch and wrestle and fight on the ground and do submissions and guard passes and takedowns and everything in between, will have every advantage over somebody who knows how to just do a modern version of karate. Or even an ancient version of karate. I'm going to put that out there. And some of you might be thinking, well, there were some old Okinawan badasses. Sure, yeah. And guess what? There are some badasses in the modern world too. If you assume that the old timers set this standard, set a bar so high that nobody in the modern world could clear it, that's not only silly, I think it's disrespectful to the old timers. Like all those folks who claim that Bruce Lee could beat up anybody in the UFC today. He could defeat any UFC heavyweight. He could out-grapple Gordon Ryan. He could out-muscle Thor Bjornsson. He could, just... There is so much myth surrounding Bruce Lee and other old-timers like him, but especially Bruce Lee. He's like this icon, demigod of epic proportions, and I say it is disrespectful to Bruce Lee and to his memory to remember him or to project this false memory of him as being this world-beating destroyer who attained a level of skill in martial arts that will never be surpassed. How sad would that be? For all of you out there, all of you martial artists out there, especially coaches and teachers of any type, what do you want for your students? What do you really want for your students? anyone who's started a martial arts style or a martial arts school, what do you want for the legacy of that school? To be remembered as the unattainable guru with a skill that nobody will ever surpass? Or do you want them to be better than you? Because if they're not, that school is going to die. In season 3 of Cobra Kai, the evil sensei John Kreese goes out recruiting some strong athletes to join his Cobra Kai dojo because he realizes that the dojo is currently populated by a bunch of nerds, or former nerds. So he goes out and he recruits a wrestler who is one of the bullies in season 1. There's a scene where he has these untrained athletes go up against the karate expert nerds, and the wrestler fights against one of the long-term Cobra Kai nerds and beats him in this very spirited, heavy sparring session. And then Sensei Kreese says something like, "You lost to an untrained fighter." And I'm scratching my head like, hold on. That guy's a wrestler. He's on the school wrestling team. And from the short clip that we saw, he was doing really well in a wrestling competition, meaning he's a trained wrestler. He's a highly trained martial artist. But nobody questions this. Not even the wrestler questions this. Because again, this happens in a universe where the UFC never happened. Because before the UFC, nobody really considered wrestling to be a martial art. A lot of people never really considered it as even a viable skill set in a fight. A lot of wrestlers themselves sold themselves short, thinking, yeah, well, it's just wrestling, it's not real fighting. And so you have some accounts of some old combat sports athletes, boxers too. Boxers also fall into this box, if you will, of serious, deadly combat sports athletes with skills to put people away, who were just casually brushed aside by the traditional martial arts community as not real martial arts because they don't put on a uniform and bow to a flag and punch and kick like we do and do their kata. And one thing the early Ultimate Fighting Championships did is open people's eyes about live combat sports. That all of the fighters who actually fight and don't just put on a uniform and go through the motions and do kata and bow, did infinitely better in actual fighting than those that did. I remember going to a karate class, and there were several wrestlers there who wrestled in high school, also wrestled in college, but they felt like their wrestling was not a legitimate martial art. And this was reinforced by the teacher there. I remember this old karate teacher was just shouting at everybody about how this style of karate is superior to wrestling, and this style of karate is superior to taekwondo and superior to every other martial art and every other combat sport. And we all seemed to buy into it back then because we didn't know any different. And when the UFC came out, we started asking some important questions. Wait a minute. Wrestling's important. Boxing's important. And all of these other aspects of fighting that were simply brushed aside and we were told to ignore are suddenly very important. Now, I'm not taking away from the fun of Cobra Kai. It's a fun show, like I said. I enjoy it immensely. I love it. I'm glad it exists. But I'm also glad that it exists in this universe where UFC never happened. Because it's this else world type of place where you can tell this type of story. See, the story of Cobra Kai doesn't really work in our world as it is today. It doesn't. All right, guys, tell me what you think about the show. If you have any other questions for future editions of Q&A with the Coach, or recommendations for future episodes of fantastic fictional fight scenes, or if you have some really bad self-defense videos you want me to review in my series MMA Fighters Try Women's Self-Defense, let me know down in the comments below. Or if you have technical questions you want to see fight technique videos about, I'll be happy to do that too. Thank you for watching. Now get out there and train. NoGiBJJGear.com is now xmartial.com, serving your needs beyond just no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, find brand new equipment for mixed martial arts, kickboxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, and more at xmartial.com. As always, use my code Ramsey10 for 10% off everything on the website. Once again, that's xmartial.com.